Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar today. I'm Katie from Wunder Mobility. For anyone who doesn't know, Wunder Mobility is the one-stop shop solution to manage and scale your shared mobility business. Before we get started on today's very interesting topic, I just want to let everyone know if you have any questions during the session, you can leave these in the chat on the right-hand side and we'll try to get to them. If not, we'll definitely reach out to you after the session to answer those. So today we're going to be looking at the topic of operational excellence in shared mobility, and more specifically what operators can do to keep their operations efficient and in this way actually reduce their operational costs. It's important for operators to have their vehicles in use. No one wants to have a vehicle that's standing around and not being used for whatever reason. So today we're going to be looking at how we can get those vehicles used by the end customers. We have done a session before on how the right vehicle and choosing vehicles can influence your operational costs. However, today we're going to be looking a little bit more from the software side, and to help us through some of those insights, we are joined by Laura Murphy. She is product owner at Wunder, and we're very happy to have you here to share some of those insights. So welcome, Laura. Thank you for joining us. Could you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role as product owner at Wunder?
Sure. I'm Laura. I've been at Wunder now for the past 2.5 years. I'm one of the product owners here, and I focus mainly on any feature that's operations related, from tasks to territories, incentives, which we'll get to in the end, and a couple of other things actually.
So you're definitely the person to speak to today on this topic then. So I think before we get started, we should probably get to the basics of what is operational excellence actually when we're talking about it in this context of shared mobility, and why is it actually important for operators to even think about this?
All right, so operational excellence is actually the combination of finding the right balance between demand and supply, not only when it comes to the vehicles itself, but also when it comes to the own costs. So while, as you mentioned, the vehicle itself is the most valuable asset, specifically the batteries usually, for the most part, one of the most costly parts of the system for an operator is their entire operations itself, so the operational costs. So excellency in this case would be finding the right balance when it comes to the number of vehicles you have and operating them at the lowest cost possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, we often think about the physical parts of the business, like the vehicles and the batteries, but of course, keeping operations efficient is a big, has a lot to do with cost as well. So let's talk a little bit then about the ways that operators can actually make their operations more efficient. And as I mentioned before, specifically if we're looking from a software side, do you have any kind of insights on what things to think about?
The most important thing usually is to always have a general overview of the health of your fleet. Know what's going on, what vehicles need servicing in any way, and that may be battery swapping in one case, maintenance work, which can be smaller like changing a mirror or adding a missing helmet, but can also be bigger maintenance happening on a regular basis, relocation of vehicles, just to know what's going on with your fleet itself. How much is it being utilized? Is it being utilized enough? Are any vehicles sitting idle? And being able to instantly see that with one glance at your fleet, not having to check everything in detail all the time. Mm-hmm. So yes, I can share my screen if you want to.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
All right. So as mentioned, the most important part is being able to see what's going on with your fleet at a glance. Mm-hmm. So the number of vehicles you might have in a location, being able to switch from one location to another, and instantly seeing the health of your fleet, how many vehicles are active and therefore accessible to the end customers. And those are the vehicles we're specifically interested in today, the ones that are not accessible to your customers for different reasons. Because they're low on battery, because they need maintenance, and for any other reason. So you want to be able to always see the balance between the two, so active versus inactive, You also want to know how many vehicles are currently being rented. So what's the utilization? And as mentioned, the battery swapping is one of the more critical parts. You also want to be able to see, you can see here on the bottom right, how many of your vehicles are in what batteries. So for example, will your operations team need to be prepared to swap a lot of batteries next couple of hours or in the next couple of days. So for example, and this is also something that's quite important, you want to be able to use vehicles, for example, on the outskirts or on the edges of your operational territory to be able to mark them for repositioning, make them accessible again. And there's different ways of doing this. You can batteries easily, or for example, you can select the vehicles on the map. And as you can see here, they're instantly selected in the system. You can change the vehicle state. In this case, it would be repositioning. And then you'll always be able to see those vehicles are the ones that are marked for repositioning and need to be taken from the outskirts of the operational territory back in. One of the other ways could also be saving vehicle filters. So filtering your entire fleet for vehicles, for example, in a certain vehicle state, like the repositioning or the battery swapping, but also simply filtering vehicles based on their battery level, on the last time they've been moved. So looking for vehicles that haven't been moved in a while, and that while in this case might be days, it might be weeks, also highly depending on whether or not you're operating kick scooters or cars, but that can be tailored specifically to your case.
Fantastic. So in this map overview, we can already see, which vehicles are not able to be used or not active at the moment for customers, and obviously we want those to be active and being used as much as possible.
Yes, you can instantly more or less see if you click, it will show you all the vehicles that for whatever reason will not be accessible to the user because they need cleaning, because they simply need a battery swap, or because they need to be repositioned, for example.
That's fantastic. And this is a filter that you have set up yourself?
That actually comes out of the box with our dashboard. As you can see at the bottom, the utilization will tell you what vehicles are available, which ones are currently in active reservations, and the ones that are currently inactive for different reasons.
Oh, fantastic. It's great to have that kind of visual overview, isn't it? Kind of at a glance to be able to see the state of your vehicles. Great, so thank you for showing us that map overview. I think that really, this visualization definitely really helps. So another way that we can improve operational efficiency is through automating certain procedures. Could you give us an example of what kind of automations might be included in that?
Sure. As you mentioned, automations are really important because every step you can cut down on manual work is cost saved and is more efficient. In our system, there's a couple of different ways you can automate. As we just went through the battery states and the battery swapping, one of the automations we offer out of the box is a battery swapping state. You can define in the system from what battery level on that will kick in specifically. But when your customers end the rides and the system realizes, for example, the battery only has 25% left, we will instantly put the vehicle in the battery swapping or battery low state. So you will instantly be able to see what vehicles need a battery swap without having to go through them yourself, but the system will trigger it after a reservation automatically.
And I guess this is really helpful then, for example, for the operations staff on the ground, so to say, to make sure you're also efficiently collecting those vehicles in a way that makes sense all at once or in a certain area.
Exactly. And we also offer an automation for the other side of the system in this case, which would be the operators themselves. So once a vehicle is marked as battery level low, it will show up for the operators. They'll be able to see that those vehicles need a battery swap, which is actually one of the parts of the system or the parts of a daily flow that have the most manual work attached to it. You need to go to the vehicle, you need to unlock it, swap the battery, make sure it's active and accessible again to the end customers. And that's something we've automated in our system. So if a vehicle is marked as battery swap needed, you'll be able to click on battery swap. We'll automatically unlock the vehicle. And the only thing you'll need to do is put in the new battery, close the battery cap again, tell the system, hey, I've done the battery swap, and we will lock the vehicle automatically again. We will change the vehicle state to make it accessible again, to cut down on that repetitive work that the operators have to go through dozens of times on a daily basis.
Yeah, fantastic. So really the only actual manual part is removing the battery itself, which unfortunately is probably a little bit tricky.
We can't automate that, unfortunately.
That part, but yeah, very, very helpful. Could you show us how this looks in the back end?
Oh, sure. So essentially, the operators have a progressive web app they can use, which is a mobile view of the system that they can log in. They'll be able to see the vehicles as well. If you click on a vehicle that has been, for example, marked with battery level low, there's this nice blue button that will show up telling you battery swap. You'll click it. And as you can see here, we'll automatically go through the flow of unlocking the vehicle, unlocking the battery door. And then once you get to the manual step, there'll be a pop-up asking you to do the manual work of actually swapping the battery, which you can then confirm once it's done. And then the flow will just continue with locking the vehicle, refreshing the vehicle state. So we're also pulling the latest IoT data to make sure the vehicle is kind of in the newest state and the system has the newest data of the vehicle. And as the last step, we'll set the vehicle back to active again. It will be rentable to the end customers again, without any additional work needed from the operators.
Oh, fantastic. And when you say it's rentable, that means if the end customer would go into the app, they'd be able to see this vehicle available. Yes. to use like usual.
Exactly.
Oh, fantastic. So apart from automating procedures, there are some other features or some other tools that can be used to reach that goal of operational excellence. Could you share a few other recommendations that you have?
Sure. The part we've just talked about is more or less just the beginning, filtering vehicles, finding out what vehicles need attention. The second part is actually assigning that work to your team, letting the team know that something needs to be done. And there's different ways. So finding out that a vehicle needs attention can be done, as we've seen, through the map. It can also be done, for example, via webhooks, so that you pull the events that happen on our side and can react to them accordingly based on your own flows. But something that we have in the system as well is task management, creating tasks needed for your operational staff, assigning those tasks, and then forwarding more or less the work to your team so they know exactly what to do. We have that built into the system, but since we're interested in kind of even further cutting down the manual work, we're actually working on integrating that task management into the map you've just seen. Mm-hmm. So to be able to select the vehicles, as I did for the state change, and in the future, you'll also be able to bulk create tasks, assign them to your operations team, to kind of get the end-to-end flow working, from figuring out that a vehicle needs attention, to actually assigning the task to somebody in your team, who can then again use the automated flow to finish that task and go through it as smoothly as possible. Mm-hmm. So to kind of roll up the process, usually it needs to be thought of as end-to-end. So figuring out that something needs to be done to a vehicle, figuring out what exactly needs to be done, and then assigning the work to your team with as less manual kind of steps as possible in between.
Mm-hmm. And keeping that process as efficient as you can. Oh, fantastic. So another area, it's also something we talked a little bit, we have talked a little bit about in other sessions, is using incentives and dynamic pricing. And I think in this case, it also does apply to boosting your operational efficiency by using these kind of tools in the back end. Could you talk us through that, how that might kind of work?
Sure. So there's a couple of different ways that you can actually use the system to make it easier, essentially. One of those is the dynamic pricing. So if you realize, for example, that a vehicle has been sitting idle for a longer time, you can identify those vehicles and then apply the dynamic pricing we have to incentivize the users to use it more. So you can reduce the price, also notify kind of the end customers about it in the app. So via different icons of those vehicles, for example, let the customers know that those are kind of in a reduced pricing scheme, which will then hopefully get them moving again, using the customers more or less as part of your operational staff.
Yeah.
To relocate the vehicles for you. And the incentive work in a similar way, but not by reducing the price of the exact vehicle that needs to be relocated, but incentivizing the end customers to give them credits or free minutes, for example, that they can then use for their rides. And you can incentivize them to, for example, start rides on the outer skirts of your operational territory. So if you start a ride with a vehicle on the outside of the operational territory, you'll get credits more or less for bringing it back into the city center, for example. So as mentioned, this is one of the ways that you can kind of use your end customer as part of your operational staff.
Yeah.
And cut down on the work of your team, because relocation is important. You need to have vehicles available in parts of the city that have high demands. But specifically when you're working with a smaller operational team, those kind of relocation tasks can be quite tedious, specifically if you have larger vehicles that can't easily be moved, like mopeds or cars, and need to be moved one by one. It's always nice to kind of loop in the end customer to help here. And I mean, who doesn't love a reduced price?
Yes, absolutely. So especially, I suppose, if you have like one vehicle that's very far away from your kind of main business area, it's much easier to have the customer ride in and kind of be rewarded for doing so with credits or a discount, and save your operations team having to go and pick it up. And operators can define these areas then, these kind of incentive zones, so to say, of what's suitable at that time.
Yeah, they can set them up however they like. They can also kind of switch them around a bit if you know a big event is coming up, for example, and the demand area might be somewhere else than it usually is. You can also incentivize customers to bring the vehicles there by incentivizing them to end rides in that specific area. If you know the next day there'll be a big festival, for example, and you want to have vehicles available, kind of simply put in an incentive area there, make the customers take the vehicles there for you, so that the next day new customers can use that vehicle again.
Yeah, fantastic. It's kind of a win-win for everyone. Yeah, great. And I think on the topic of pricing, another topic we've touched on in the past is also, for example, the pricing models themselves. So like setting up maybe more long-term rentals, like a daily package or even a subscription, which also kind of incentivizes your users to regularly use your vehicles and keep them moving. Fantastic. So yeah, I think a final point that we wanted to reach today, I mean, there's a lot of features and a lot of different things that kind of all lead towards this operational efficiency. But one thing was via partnerships, and we actually did get a question about integrating third-party integrations, because there are a lot of partners who specialize in certain specific features that can be integrated and that also can focus on this operational excellence. Could you just explain a little bit how that might work on the software side?
Sure. We provide APIs and API endpoints that then the partners or the third parties in general can use to help you with your setup. Again, specific operators might have specific needs based on their business model, based on the size of their team, how they want to organize their operations. And in case what we have out of the box is not enough, we have marketplace partners that you can use to help you with data analysis of your fleet, to help you with the operational side in more general terms. But also any third-party provider can be integrated when it comes to using our APIs. They can consume the information from us, and then you can kind of set up as you like it. So that's something that we also support.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. I know a few of our customers are working with different partners like this to boost their operations. And of course, we're always there to help to support them in setting that up. Yeah, thank you so much for all your insights. We have had a few more questions actually. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. This topic is just full of insights and full of information that I think can really help operators think about the kinds of ways that they can make their operations more efficient. Today, just kind of to summarize, we talked about, how different features from the software side can be used, for example, managing the vehicle status, using filters, using that map overview to keep an eye on the status of your vehicles, automating different kinds of procedures, including the battery swap, which we saw earlier, task management, using incentives and pricing as a way to improve your operations, and then also kind of how integrations or partners can also help to reach this operational excellence. So we've covered a lot of ground. And yeah, we will get back to everybody. We will send a replay as well to everybody if there's anything you missed or want to watch again. So yeah, thank you, Laura, so much for your time and for sharing all of this information with us. It was really insightful.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.